It is Thursday, January 22nd, 2015, and I'm your host, Kathy Mitchell. Today I am very happy to say that our guest is Deb Moore. Deb Moore is the new director of Compeer. We will be talking about Compeer in some depth today, but right now, Deb, welcome. And if you could tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here, Kathy. Well, I'm a fairly recent resident of Iowa City. I lived here many, many years ago, but I moved back recently, and because I love Iowa City. There's so many wonderful things to do. Most of my work experience has been in the nonprofit sector.
Okay.
I have worked at, many years ago, I worked at Goodwill. I worked for a retirement community. I taught for 10 years at Kirkwood. And in terms of my education, I have a master's degree in mental health counseling, and at some point hope to go back to doing counseling. And then I also have a master's in English language and literature, which is what I taught at Kirkwood when I was there.
Okay, well, thank you. So now let's get to Compeer. First of all, there's a lot of people out there who don't even know that Compeer exists.
Yes.
So first of all, explain to them what Compeer is, what it does, and if you could give some history of the organization, it would be very helpful.
Okay. So the Compeer program began in 1977, and it was developed by a woman named Bernice Scoble. She had had an experience when she did a vehicle accident, and she was in a group called Adopt a Patient, and she adapted that. She had such a positive experience with that, she adapted it into the Compeer program. The Compeer program has a very specific goal in Iowa City, and that is that we match adults who have been living with mental illness most of their lives with a friend in the community, so that they have someone that they can spend time with, go out for coffee, just really develop a real friendship to reduce the isolation and loneliness that so often accompanies mental illness.
What is your involvement specifically as director? What do you do? If you could give somebody an idea of how your office is organized in terms of possible other staff, your daily routines, the funding, and so on. What do you specifically do?
Okay. So as the director of the Compeer program, I'm it. I'm the only staff person.
You're it.
Yes, and I work 20 hours per week. And because it is such a small nonprofit, I literally have responsibility for every part of the program. So I recruit volunteers, I train volunteers, and we'll talk a little bit more about that a little later. I deal with the referrals from therapists in the community to the program. I do all of the marketing, all of the fundraising, all of the development of marketing materials. So pretty much everything that is required to keep the program moving.
And of course, I'm very interested. Why did you want to get involved? You say you like Iowa City and your background is in nonprofit, but what was it about this program that you wanted to do this and be director of it?
I was very interested in this program because it is unlike any other volunteer experience that's out there. It also provides a service that has become increasingly rare. There are only 54 Compeer programs in the entire world.
Wow.
We are the only one in Iowa. The closest one to us is, I think, in Indiana. So it's a very unique opportunity to provide a service that I think is extremely valuable. So in many ways, when I went to the interview, I wasn't sure that I was the right person. But what immediately became clear was that my background, because I had done marketing, I had done public speaking, I had done teaching, I had worked in nonprofit, I had a degree in counseling. This job uses all of those skills, and I love that. I love that I'm able to apply all of my work experience pretty much in my whole life to this position.
Okay. So
I wish that it was more hours. If we had a little more money, I could work more hours because the program needs that. And that's really the primary thing that we need funding for, if that makes sense. Like I said, so the challenges are volunteers, funding, and the third one is we are always looking for board members. And at this point, it would be wonderful to have someone who maybe had a legal background. We don't currently have an attorney. Someone like that would be wonderful. So if you're looking to serve in that capacity, that would be fantastic.
how many board members do you have?
We currently have 14.
14.
So we have a couple of spots that we could fill. We had someone leave.
You just really jumped on my next question, which is, in the Iowa City-Johnson County area, there are so many organizations and agencies that deal with mental health. Really specifically, what makes Compeer unique and specifically why it is necessary? You've sort of alluded to that, but really what are the specifics of it?
So the Compeer program is unique in a couple of ways. In terms of being a social service program, something to offer an opportunity for those who have been living with mental illness. It provides a one-on-one relationship that the person may never have had as an adult. Because one of the facets of mental illness, particularly long-term mental illness, is that often, unfortunately, families end up not wanting to be connected with the person anymore.
Right.
Over time, marriages fail often. Friends fall away. So these folks do tend to become very, very isolated. So to have an opportunity where they have someone in the community who deeply cares about them is a very positive experience for them. It is the only organization where you will have a person who has, who's maybe receiving mental health treatment, and we deal with adults. Our clients are always adults. So they may be receiving support from the Supported Community Living Program. They certainly have a therapist because they have to as part of the program, but they don't really have anyone that's going to help them stay connected to other people, that's going to allow them to reconnect with their community. So the program is a very valuable piece of their recovery process, in that they have one person in the world for sure who cares about them, who connects with them, who contacts them on a regular basis. So it's a very meaningful one-on-one relationship. At the same time, for volunteers, there's no other volunteer experience like it. The benefits to someone who wants to volunteer for Compeer is that we try to find someone who matches you, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. And then we also look at location. We always match it by gender. What you end up happening is an opportunity that you create the relationship with the participant. You do things that you both enjoy, and you can do it on your own schedule entirely. So Compeer has been recognized as a best practice by the APA, the American Psychological Association, and I think that makes a lot of sense, because the social aspect of recovering from mental illness, getting reconnected to the community, relearning maybe social skills, can all work together in this one-to-one relationship.
Okay.
For the volunteers, it's an opportunity unlike any other volunteer opportunity that's out there, because you can choose the activities that you do. You decide where and when you want to meet with them, so it's extremely flexible. And it's also a chance to develop someone who, over time, volunteers have told me, becomes an important friend to the volunteer as well.
Where do the clients come from? You know, how do they approach you with their request for volunteer assistance?
So the process to become a participant in our program, you said you used the word client, is that the referral comes from their therapist.
Okay.
And that is one of the requirements to be in the program. Compeer has a very specific setup in that if you think of a triangle with the participant, client in the center, it's a supported friendship in that the therapist is there in case there are any concerns or issues. I'm there to support both the participant and the volunteer if need be. And then the third corner of the triangle is the volunteer. So if you think of a triangle, we're all there to help make this friendship work. So the way the process works is sometimes the participant will call me and say, hey, I have a friend in Compeer, and they got a friend, and I'd like to do that. So then I say, are you seeing a therapist? And the therapist makes the referral. And they send a pretty thorough referral in terms of what the person's primary diagnosis is, and what they hope that the client will experience in the process. In other words, the goals, why they're referring them now. And once that happens, then I bring the participant in. I do an interview with them to learn about a little bit about their personality, where they live, transportation options, things they like to do, the kind of person they might want to be matched with. So that's where they come from. The requirements to be a participant are, you have to be able to be at a point where you can set up meeting times, attend those meeting times, and be able to participate fully in the relationship. And then the only other requirement is that the therapist is aware, they've made the referral, and if there are any concerns or issues, that they are available to help make sure the friendship goes well.
Okay, very good. Let's talk on the volunteer side. How do we find volunteers for Compeer, and once we find volunteers, what is the training?
Volunteers come to us in a variety of ways. Sometimes they hear about the program through Volunteer Match, which is an online service. Sometimes I will have done a public speaking engagement and they'll heard about it that way. Oftentimes, they'll be looking for a volunteer opportunity, and what normally happens is that the majority of our volunteers come from three groups of people. People who have experienced mental illness themselves, people who have had a family member who's had a mental illness, and the third group tends to be people who are already working in the community or maybe did before they were retired. So for example, therapists, we have a fair number of graduate students who are studying to be therapists who also want to be volunteer friends. So that's where, that tends to be our pool of people. We do have a fair number of people who are retired, and we would love to have more of those people come and volunteer for us. So the training process and the referral process goes like this. They call me, they let me know they want to be a volunteer. They come in and we do an interview, and we do a background check just to make sure there are no issues, because we don't want to put the participant in danger at all, right? And then we do a references check. So we look for people, we ask for two kinds of references, personal and work, just to get an idea of what their work experience might have been, and if someone else thinks they'd be a good match. And since I have both the interview from both people, and I've gotten to know them, and I spend a minimum of an hour with each person, I have a fairly good idea of who I think might be a good match.
Okay.
So sometimes I will offer the volunteer maybe 2 or 3 different possibilities for a friend, but just as often I can look at them and say, I think you guys would be a good match. One of the things that I think people worry about a little bit is, I'm sure you know, that there's still a very strong stigma attached to mental illness.
Yes, very much.
Yes. So what ends up happening is when I do that first interview with the volunteer, I can sort of tell what kind of things they might be concerned about. And I answer a lot of their questions at that point. And then the third piece of this, the training sort of application process, is I do a 3-hour training session with them. We have a handbook that we go through. And then the first month to 6 weeks, after I've matched the pair, I decided that 2 people would be good friends, and I go and I meet them and introduce them to one another. And from that point on, I'm not really involved in the relationship, except in the capacity of help, checking in. So after the first month, 6 weeks, I'll probably talk to both the participant and the volunteer 2 or 3 times to make sure we're getting off on the right foot, to make sure that they think it's a good match. And then the other piece of that is that the volunteer does provide me with a monthly report.
There we go,
And that's really important because we track hours for funding, which we haven't talked about yet. The other piece of that is that there's a part on the form that says, do you have any concerns? You know, and that's a very good way to give me a heads up that maybe a person, for example, has stopped taking their medication. So letting me know that, we can make sure that the person gets any help they may need.
Keeping confidentiality, of course, in check here. Do you have any kind of testimonials from the client side and from the volunteer side of really the positive aspects of this relationship?
Yes. We did a match over around the Christmas time, probably in November actually, because I got a Christmas card from the participant who said, thank you so much for bringing Janice into my life. Obviously, that's a pseudonym. She's a perfect match for me. We are teaching one another. No, I'm teaching her to knit, and she is teaching me about cats, which I thought was interesting. So that's what it's really all about, is just having that connection, finding things that you enjoy together. One thing I wanted to add, for the volunteers, we only ask that they meet with the participant 4 hours per month.
Okay.
So it's not a huge time commitment. What most people end up doing is spending about 2 hours together twice a month.
Okay. I'm real interested because what type of activities do they do?
They can do whatever they decide they want to do, and it's interesting too, because the groups come up with things, the pairs come up with things that I wouldn't necessarily thought of. Okay, so one of our volunteer matches, it's 2 men, and we definitely need more male volunteers. And one of the things that they did this last year was drive around to small towns around Iowa City to find out who had the best tenderloin sandwich.
Okay.
It was just a fun thing to do.
Did they find it?
You know, it was funny because the volunteer who happens to be a board member wanted to maybe publish about this experience, but they disagreed on who had the best tenderloin sandwich.
They did it.
So.
They did it. Great. Okay. So right now, let's do the pitch right now.
Okay.
Somebody wants to volunteer for Compeer. How do they contact you? Let's just do the pitch right now.
All right. So if you would like to maybe be a participant in the program or volunteer, you can contact me at 319-338-7884, extension 245, or at dmoore, D-M-O-O-R-E, at meimhc.org. My office is in the Community Mental Health Center building at 505 East College. I'm not employed by the Mental Health Center. We are a private little nonprofit, but that's where my office is.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Can we talk about the future of Compeer? Any challenges, goals to meet? I know that fundraising is always the big one, but besides fundraising, and certainly I know you want to talk about that, what other challenges are you meeting for the future?
The primary challenge for the Compeer program is getting volunteers.
It is.
It is our #1 need. I think partly, again, because we come back to that idea of stigma. And the other thing is people, because we are such a small nonprofit, a lot of people don't even know we exist. So that is our absolute biggest need, because the program doesn't exist without volunteers.
Right.
And we have more female volunteers. We definitely could use some more male volunteers. But that is our biggest need. Actually, I will have been there a year in February. But one of my big challenges is I need to get out there in the community and let more people know about Compeer, which is what I'm hoping will partly happen today.
Okay, let's talk about fundraising. It's difficult for any organization.
It is.
No matter how big, how established they are, it's always a big one. What do you do, since it's just you?
The majority of our money comes from contributions. We do 2 fundraising letters a year, one in August and then one towards late November. And that works in a couple of ways. Lots of times we add people to that through the year. And so they learn, there's always information about Compeer and the fundraising information. And so that's probably our biggest way to get contributions, is through our local fundraising efforts. In addition to that, we do get some city funding. We get some funding from a pharmaceutical company. The local churches have been pretty helpful, but like all social service agencies, we could definitely use more funding.
Okay. Do you do any events to raise money?
Yes, our biggest fundraising event is happening in February of this year. It's the 12th year for Compeer's Sound of Friendship concert. And we hold it at St. Andrew Presbyterian Church, which is on Melrose. And this year, we have 3 performers, plus we have some pre-concert performers. Spontaneous Combustion will be performing before the concert in the lobby area. And then the concert will consist of 3 different acts. The first is Cole Shara, who performs world music. The second is a gospel duet, who work at the University of Iowa Hospitals, Russell Johnson and Dr. Ernie Found. And then the third group is the University of Iowa Pan American Steel Drum Band. After the concert, we have a dessert reception
Okay.
where local bakeries and board members bring desserts. And usually they're, my understanding, this is my first year, but my understanding is that they're always gourmet desserts.
Okay.
So the concert's from 7 to 8:30, then we have the dessert reception.
And again, that date is?
Saturday, February 28th
Mm-hmm.
at St. Andrew Presbyterian Church. Tickets are $20. One of the things we might encourage you to do is, if you can't come to the concert yourself, we would very much like to have all of our participants, their volunteer friends, and then people on our waiting list to come to the concert as well.
Okay.
So the tickets would be donated so that they could attend.
And they contact you directly for the tickets?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct.
Okay. I want to ask you, do you ever, in terms of any of your outreach, any of your program, do you ever work with any other organizations? I have like in mind like NAMI, or so have you ever done that? Have you ever done any kind of pairing up with them?
We have not done that specifically, but I think that in this atmosphere of funding, all of us are going to have to start doing more of that, working together, because as you say, it's a struggle for all nonprofits.
Okay.
So I see in the future that there may be more sort of connections. For example,
It's 1105.
there we go, 1105.
1105.
That was a very good marriage of the Crisis Center and NAMI and
Yes.
and the
DVIP.
free lunch. Yes,
And
exactly.
DVIP, right.
So I can see those kinds of things happening for Compeer in the future. That would be wonderful.
Be wonderful. As the new director, coming up to your first anniversary, what has been most satisfying for you?
The absolute most satisfying thing is to see the friendships connect and grow. I met someone the other day who had been friends with their friend, who had been the volunteer friend, and the participant had been friends for 12 years.
Oh, wow.
And it becomes a significant part of their life.
That's wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yes, you had asked about some of the challenges of the Compeer program. One of the things I neglected to mention is that we always have a waiting list of people waiting for a friend.
Okay.
So we currently have about 20 matched friendships. We also have 20 people on our waiting list who
Okay.
very much want a friend. Several of them call me every month or so and say, have you found anyone that would be a good match for me? Some of them have been on the waiting list well over a year. So I just wanted to mention that we have people waiting for a friend.
So this is very clear that this is a very, very important organization that you run.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and it has been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for this
Okay.
opportunity.
Okay, thank you.